Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to our webinar, Defossilising Aviation with e-SAF. We are having about 100 participants already joining this event, which is a special event. Today we are launching a new publication by International Poetry X-Hub and our partners from Agora Industry, Agora Verkehrwende in Germany. You can see it here on our welcome slide, and we are very happy to be with you here in the special event with some international guests as well on the screen today here with us. More warm welcome, actually, I would like to express to all the members of the PTX community. Many of you online might have joined us through this channel, and the ones who have not ever heard about the PTX community, maybe just a very short introduction. The PTX community is the group of our alumni, our PTX trainers, and other enthusiasts that have joined International PTX Hub's activities during the last years. And we invite all of you to join this community. It is hosted on the e-learning platform Atingi. And on this slide, and also later in the chat, you will find the information how to enter. And the special offer of this community are the regular PTX community calls that we offer to all of you in a more or less bi-monthly rhythm. And today's session and the special topic of defossilising aviation is one of our community calls. It's our July edition of the PTX community calls. So warm welcome to all members, and I hopefully will see many of you still joining the community after our event of today. Let's have a short look at the agenda. Today, after my introduction, we will hear Frank Mischler, the Director of International PTX Hub, and Wiebke Zimmer, Deputy Director from Agora Verkehrwende, for some introductory welcoming words. Then we will have Berks on the stage, who is one of the main authors from Agora Verkehrwende of the new paper we are launching today, and he will give us insights into the content actually that we would like to share with you today. After that, we will hear Laís Thomaz from Brazil, giving us an insight on the policies and projects for SAF that actually are taking a good shape and dynamics in Brazil. So very curious to hear your presentation, Laís. Thank you for joining us. And after this, we will be receiving Hanifa Hassanow from Kenya. She's working with the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, KCAA, also a very close partner from PTX Hub in Kenya and working strongly on clean aviation. After the inputs, we will join all together here for a panel discussion and also have the possibility to answer the questions that you might have. And let me just explain you how to do that actually. So for the questions and answers, we advise you to use the question and answer Slido tool. This is being shared, the link to the Slido tool is being shared in the chat. You can also access it via the QR code that is shown on the slide. Please write your questions in this tool. We will be organizing the questions and try to address most of them in our Q&A session. You can rate questions by putting up a thumb up function on a question that you like, and this will make the probability of us promoting it here during the event a little bit higher. The meeting is being recorded as it was announced before, and this means that you will also have the possibility to see it later on again. We will have access to the recording of the meeting on the Agora Industry website, where you found all the initial information as well, but also, of course, on the PTX community platform. With this, no further ado, I would like to hand over to our first speaker, who is Frank Mischler, joining us from Brussels.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Yes, I'm on. And thank you to all aviation enthusiasts who joined this webinar. And I think you all join us in this challenge and this ambition to make aviation and flying climate neutral, which is not a small quest. It's one of the biggest challenges that we have. You, of course, follow the news, follow the technologies like we do. There are these hard-to-abate sectors for which we have solutions like steel and maritime shipping. And aviation is maybe the hardest nut to crack. We only have 25 years until 2050, so time is running out and there's not too much happening right now. The technology that's most promising is sustainable aviation fuel. The little SAF, that's the operation that's produced right now, it's mainly based on biofuels or oils like Hefa. And you see little PTL SAF or e-SAF, which the publication talks about a lot. And to really meet our targets and to meet the targets of the EU, which is also a part of the publication, you need a very, very big ramp up of this, which we as the PTX Hub, a knowledge center for all PTX solutions, is really what we are fostering. And in our view, at least, you don't have any time to lose, and you need to have the start of production in as many countries as possible. There are, of course, some countries that have better conditions than others, and Brazil and Kenya are clearly amongst them, and we will hear from their view. But we need more action, more countries. That's why the PTX Hub is doing everything it can, what happened now, to build the networks that we need with EASA, with ICAO, have training, have networks at Brussels level, in Berlin. There's an action by BMWK, the Transport Ministry, the Economic Affairs Ministry, bring all people together to really start action. So our dream is that in many, many countries we see first attempts, small plants, and then growing and have production of e-SAF everywhere. And for this publication is a very important element because it discusses all the important issues that you need to know for this, the policy level, the regulatory concerns, the technology concerns, and it's a good platform to start a discussion, which we hope to do today. But it's by no means way finished. There will be many activities that we do together, Agora, Verkehrwende, and PTX Hub, which I think we'll talk about. So I thank you for coming to this webinar, and wish you a very fruitful discussion and lots of new insights. Thank you. Back to you, Ruth.
Thanks a lot, Frank, for these welcoming words from the side of the International PTX Hub. And with this, I would now hand over to Wiebke Zimmer, Deputy Director of Agora Verkehrswende. Welcome.
Thank you, Ruth. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome you as well to our webinar today. And I can't add much to that what Frank already said. As Agora Verkehrswende, we are developing recommendations on how to realize a transformation to a climate neutral transport system in line with German but also international climate protection targets. And in this context, aviation plays an important role as it is compared to other modes of transport much harder to phasing out of fossil fuels. So that is why we, the International PTX Hub and Agora Verkehrswende, prepared this new analysis of the current state of research with a view to defossilization of the aviation sector using these power-based sustainable aviation fuels. And perhaps in view of the latest discussions in Germany, challenges like project financing, production ramp up, but also international cooperation have to be solved in a timely manner. And I think both a brief insight into our study as well as the country cases of Kenya and Brazil, countries with strong ambitions to ramp up the production of SAF, will give us exciting insights in our following discussion. I'm looking forward to it. But first of all, I would like to take the opportunity today to thank all the partners and stakeholders that have been involved in preparing our study on how to defossilize aviation with e-SAF. And a special thanks goes to colleagues at the International PTX Hub. Thank you very much for the great cooperation, and the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action and the EKI for funding this project. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the webinar today.
Thank you very much, Wiebke, for these warm words. And with this, I think we are good to start and to get into the topic. And for this, as I mentioned before, Leon Berks from Agora Verkehrwende will hold the presentation, but I would like to just very shortly mention that he hasn't done the work on the Agora side on his own. Ulf Neuling and myself and Thorsten Schwab and also some other colleagues like Ulrich Kast or Jan-Hendrik Scheil have contributed to this joint work, and it was really a great experience. We will see Ulf Neuling later in the panel discussion as well. And give now the words to Leon. We are curious to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Let me quickly share my screen. Yeah, thank you also from my side for joining today. I'm happy to present to you the core findings of our joint publication, Defossilising Aviation with e-SAF. This publication summarizes the current state of the e-SAF ramp-up, and what makes this paper stand out, in our opinion, is that it really covers the multiple facets of the e-SAF production. So from the production of e-SAF to cost development to policy, as well as sustainability. So, and therefore it kind of provides a profound knowledge for policymakers and all other stakeholders that are wishing to engage in this field. It is available for download as of today, and you can access the paper via this QR code. Yeah. Without further ado, let's continue with our findings of the paper. To begin with, the member states of ICAO have set the aspirational goal of achieving net zero in aviation by 2050. And this graph here shows you the current states of emission in aviation. The black dashes, if you follow them, project a path to be followed to reach this net zero goal. And without any intervention, emissions from flying are actually projected to grow further as more and more people, obviously, around the globe are starting to fly. And the question that really has to be answered in the coming years is how can we achieve net zero given this outlook and sort of close this gap of emissions here? There are multiple options that we can think of in this regard, such as, for example, technological improvements when it comes to the fuel efficiency of airplanes, for example. But as you can see here, by far the largest lever at around 61% emission reduction contribution would actually be a fuel switch. This chart here sort of further underlines this argument. There is work underway to develop battery electric and hydrogen powered aircrafts that could be particularly applicable to short and medium haul flights. But for the time being, aviation will continue to rely on liquid fuels, especially so for the long haul flights. And this is really where sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, as you call it in abbreviated version, and in particular e-SAF, comes in to replace liquid hydrocarbons that are used in aviation today. When it comes to the CO2 mitigation potential of SAF, it is important to understand firstly that there are different SAF types and also different SAF production pathways. So for simplicity, we can distinguish here between bio-SAF, which are these bars in green, and e-SAF, which is the bar in blue, and then conventional kerosene is the dark blue bar here. As you can see, compared to conventional jet fuel, e-SAF has a CO2 mitigation potential of 95 to 100%. That is, of course, depending on the CO2 footprint of the various steps of the supply chain. But also in comparison to sustainable aviation fuels that were produced with a biogenic feedstock, e-SAF shows a higher potential for CO2 mitigation, which is why we discuss e-SAF today as such an important option to defossilize aviation. But maybe let's take a quick step back and see how e-SAF is actually produced, which then can help us to understand where this high CO2 mitigation potential actually comes from and what it depends on really as well. So e-SAF is essentially synthetically produced kerosene, so a fuel produced targeted to the very specific requirements of the aviation sector, and part of this fuel group that has become known as e-fuels. e-SAF is produced via a synthesis process, so such as the Fischer-Tropsch synthesis or methanol synthesis, with hydrogen from electrolysis using renewable electricity and a CO2 source. For the CO2 source, really the use of a CO2 source from a closed carbon cycle is essential. And this CO2 can be derived from, for example, direct air capture technology that filters CO2 out of the air that has already been emitted, or from a biogenic source, as obviously plants also filter out CO2 from the air, and then this CO2 can be obtained when biomass is processed, for example. And when this CO2 comes from these sources, e-SAF really exhibits the highest CO2 reduction potential compared to other fuel options, because then no further CO2 is added to the atmosphere once the synthetic kerosene is combusted in the airplane. Yeah, when we look at the ramp up now of e-SAF production, one decisive factor, of course, are the production costs. And this chart here shows that electrolysis and renewable power generations account for more than 50% of e-SAF production cost. Renewable electricity costs are to a large part determined by favorable weather conditions and the full load hours that can be achieved by solar plants or PV plants. Therefore, the production of e-SAF in so-called sweet spot production regions that have a high solar radiation or wind hours could actually be very, very beneficial to reduce production costs. Our analysis, however, also finds that one decisive bottleneck remains the supply of sustainable CO2, because point sources in sweet spot regions are rare, and this sort of makes the large-scale deployment of direct air capture technology inevitable. And we have found that, contrary to previous findings, the deployment of DSC is likely to be attached to very high costs and will therefore remain a significant factor in the determination of e-SAF production costs. Today, e-SAF production is very expensive. So on average, the estimates foresee current production costs at around 4,240 euros per ton. This is this line that you can see here. Looking forward, production costs are estimated to fall to around 1,090 to 2,620 euros per ton by 2050, but that is of course dependent on robust market deployment and resulting effects of economies of scale and associated learning curve effects. Nonetheless, there remains to be a substantial gap between conventional kerosene prices today and the production costs for e-SAF. As you can see, the price for conventional jet fuel stood at 650 euros per ton in June 2024. And at this point, it's also important to keep in mind that production costs and eventual market prices are not the same. So the market prices for e-SAF could even be higher than what you see in this graph. And this really is a problem to the e-SAF ramp up, because off-takers of e-SAF or potential off-takers of e-SAF are likely to remain hesitant to purchase expensive e-SAF. And as a consequence, final investment decisions by producers for e-SAF plants today remain very scarce. So there have been several announcements mostly across Europe and the US. However, also here, final investment decisions and announcements can also diverge. So there's also a likelihood that these announcements that you see on this map here will also not materialize. In order to overcome these hurdles to the ramp up and stimulate the supply, governments around the globe really are taking action in terms of policy introduction. And this here is an overview of policies that are already in place in selected jurisdictions. As you can see, the European Union and member states such as Germany have already introduced binding measures such as compulsory e-fuel blending quotas for fuel suppliers. However, there are more and more countries that are eager to introduce policies and have, for example, also tabled already proposals for such policies. For example, Brazil has tabled a Fuel of the Future program, which foresees the introduction of CO2 reduction targets for airlines in their domestic operations that has to be complied with the usage of SAF. And I'm pretty sure that we will learn more about that in Laís' presentation later on. So yeah, we have seen the map of production announcements, but would these fuel volumes actually be enough to meet the induced demand by the policies that are in place right now? Here you can see the global capacity, the global production capacity could actually meet the mandated EU demand for 2030 and 2032, but it will fall short from 2035 unless the production capacity is ramped up. And yeah, keep in mind again here that this projection here is based on the announcements. So this doesn't mean that these volumes are actually going to be available. And also the demand projections here are based only on the EU quota mandate. So if we were to achieve this target that I've mentioned in the introduction of defossilized aviation in 2050, the required fuel volumes for SAF and e-SAF would be far higher. And this really underlines the need for comprehensive policy instruments in markets around the globe. Yeah, and this need for global efforts becomes clearer through this sort of exemplary calculation that we've done in our study. In order to meet the global aviation fuel demand with e-SAF from renewable electricity produced via photovoltaic systems, around 5.9 terawatts would actually have to be newly developed. And this equals roughly around 5 times of the worldwide installed capacity of PV in 2022. The attached land area that would be required for these PV plants would also be enormous at around 138,000 square kilometers. And yeah, this land would obviously have to be divided among sweet spot production regions. We have picked out 3 regions here as an exemplary case. This is the Atacama Desert in Chile, then the Eastern Desert on the African continent, and then the Great Victoria Desert in Australia. And then we set the PV capacity that is required in each of these regions in relation to the land area available and also the currently installed capacity. And as you can see, the required PV capacity exceeds the current local capacities by many multiples. Yeah, when we look at this enormous mission, it is mandatory in our view also to keep in mind that these highly favorable locations for renewables productions are relatively rare from a global perspective, and that they should therefore be harnessed in a just and also sustainable manner. It is important to not only look at e-SAF productions through these lenses of CO2 reductions, but also on how e-SAF can actually contribute to sustainable development. And yeah, in this regard, the EESG framework that has been developed by our partners at the International PTX Hub can be very useful. You can see that sustainability is actually attached to multiple dimensions. One of them is the environmental dimension, which is mostly talked about and which I've also touched mostly upon today. But there are also, of course, economic aspects, such as the local value added through local production and also local demand stimulation, but also social aspects like the inclusion of the local population and also human rights consideration. And then, yeah, the governance dimension really acts as a facilitator through which, through like beneficial policy design and also policy enforcement. Yeah, only if these dimensions are sort of addressed equally and simultaneously also, e-SAF production can be part of what is called the just energy transition. to wrap things up, we have come up with 5 key takeaways of our study. First is the current system of fossil fuels is obviously not a viable option for the future, and also not a viable option to achieve net zero in aviation. And SAF really will be indispensable for advancing climate protection in aviation. We call upon policymakers across the globe to facilitate a market ramp-up by adopting suitable political and regulatory frameworks. And these regulatory frameworks should also include comprehensive sustainability criteria for e-SAF, as this is essential for social and environmental sound production and use. Once these political frameworks for e-SAF are in place globally, it will really fall to the industry and also to investors to rapidly expand the supply of e-SAF. And lastly, in our view, a sole focus on what is called sweet spot regions that offer particularly beneficial conditions for the e-SAF production is not enough. We think that there needs to be an overarching strategy that really addresses all major dimensions of the e-SAF productions, so from renewable power generations over carbon sourcing to project finance to ensure a swift ramp up of e-SAF. Yeah, with that I finish. Thank you for your attention, and back to you, Ruth.
Thank you very much, Leon, for the insight into the new study. If first questions are popping up on the content, or you might have had a first glance into the publication through the download link, please put them into the Q&A tool, and after the other presentations, we will address them and have Leon and Ulf on the floor as well to respond. So with no further ado, I would like to call our next speaker, who is Laís Thomaz from Brazil. She is advisor to the Brazilian National Secretariat of Petroleum, Natural Gas and Biofuels at the Ministry of Mines and Energy. And yeah, we have quite some story together, Laís, because we met already in Brazil while GIZ was still working on the ProQR climate neutral fuels project. And we worked together on didactical material for academia in Brazil for SAF. So it was an exciting start of our collaboration. And we are very happy to see you in this new position at the ministry right now. And I hand over to you, and very curious to hear what's going on in Brazil regarding defossilizing aviation and ramping up SAF.
Thank you so much, Ruth. It's really a pleasure to be here. I feel like part of the GIZ friends here in Brazil, and also was a great experience to have to be part of the mission that we developed in 2 years ago, and it has been a challenge to become a policymaker now, to help the Secretary of Petroleum, Natural Gas and Biofuels, but I'm trying to do my best to represent the Ministry of Mines and Energy here at this panel. So just to have everyone at the same page, I like to have this slide specifically because every time I have to do a new presentation, I have to update, and it's a good sign. So right now we have 8 pathways approved by the ASTM to produce SAF. So that's really good news, especially the last one also is alcohol to jet, but with aromatics from Sweden. But it's also very important to understand the ones that we are talking here, especially the Fischer-Tropsch ones. So right now we have 124 airports with SAF, also good news, 53.2 billion liters of SAF under offtake agreements, more than 300 SAF facilities announced, and the total capacity is 103 billion liters per year. So the scenario is changing a lot. We have to update this every time. But talking directly about Brazil, since 2009, our regulatory agents of oil, gas, and biofuels is working on regulations about jet fuels and the pathways, to incorporate the pathways of SAF in our national framework. And another milestone in our framework for SAF is the renewable bio, which right now doesn't have a specific obligation of SAF, but when it was developed, it included the SAF pathway, the HEFA pathway in its calculator. So it's important to say that, because once we get our next bill approved of our SAF mandate, it's going to be, of course, included in this calculator. So in 2021, we also had this really good national hydrogen program launched at our National Energy Policy Council, which is important if you think that every pathway in SAF terms will use hydrogen. So it's also another important program launched in 2021, and also the Fuel of the Future program that Leo talked before. So this was a really important program launched in 2021. We divided the multiple initiatives in different technical committees. So we had one specific for SAF. The name was in the time ProBio QAV. And I'll talk more about how it worked, but it developed all the approach, all the conversations that we ended up in this bill that was sent to the Congress in the last year. So finally, in September last year, the Fuel of the Future bill was sent to Brazilian Congress by the Lula administration. And this year was a really good success at the lower house. We still need to approve the bill at the Senate. The Senator Veneziano is doing the report, and hopefully we have at the end of this year more regulations that will take place to make sure that we have the mandate regulations with ANAC, our national civil aviation agents, and also ANP, the one that deals with biofuels. So as stated before, we decided to not have a specific volume or blend mandate. We decided to make our mandate based on the carbon emission reductions. So it starts in 2027 and goes up to 2037 and comes from 1% to 10%. And in this program, we also have the mandate, the use of the green diesel is also in the bill. And with that, we expect that 63 million tons of CO2 equivalent will be avoided in this 10 years mandate. Just to understand, so when we talk about 1% reduction, if you use only the HEFA pathway with the soybean feedstock as a feedstock, we're talking about a volume of 4.1% of volume. Of course, in Brazil, we have this potential of ethanol. So the alcohol to jet with the ethanol is a little bit more than 1.6% of the volume, up to 15.8% when it's 10% of carbon emission reductions. And this is only a simulation. Of course, when we once the bill is approved, we're gonna have all this discussion about which pathway can be used in each airport and everything about all the debate about the blends of that, but we decided to make this exercise to understand. When you talk about Fischer-Tropsch, the e-fuels, we also need to do more calculations, but one is 1.1% of volume when it's 1% of carbon reductions up to 11% of the volume. And of course, when we set the targets, everyone was concerned about how many facilities would be necessary to achieve that target. So in our calculations, based in the announcements, we need, for example, one facility and based on the investments of 2 billion reais to achieve this mandate. And in 2037, we're going to need 7 facilities with 14 billion of investments. So here, just a big picture of the committee where we were formulating the Fuel of the Future program. It was very interesting to hear 51 multi-stakeholders, so the whole supply chain was participating in the debate, and all the contributions were mapping, so we could finalize the proposal of the bill with the 5 pillars, the fundamental cornerstones that allowed us to propose that to the Congress. And talking about the potential of feedstocks for SAF, also it is important to say that the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials had this study, a really interesting study, stating that the potential for SAF production from the make-bed residues in Brazil is up to 90 billion liters, which is more than we need for jet fuel, the fossil kerosene. So it's going to be good to have this scenario. I don't know how long it will take to produce 90 billion liters of SAF in Brazil, but once we make it, we can also export. Of course, right now, the pathways that have more technological readiness level are for us, HEFA and ATJ. So we think in another study that we are developing that we can pursue these pathways, but because of the mandates not based on the volume of these pathways, it's important that the more efficient pathway, we're gonna have more good results for our mandate. It's a technological neutral, we can say that. And just to understand also the research and development initiatives, in 2018, we had this Brazilian network of biokerosene and renewable hydrocarbons for aviation, RBQAV. It's an important initiative led by the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovations, and it was more focused on research, but also helped to increase the inputs for the policymakers of how important the production of biokerosene was at the time, and now, of course, it is an important network to coordinate more research, more technological investments, and also public policies. And as Ruth mentioned, also we had this climate neutral alternative fuels, the ProQR, and it was a really interesting partnership between Brazil and Germany, specifically to develop the e-fuels and the Fischer-Tropsch pilot plants in Brazil. Now we still have the partnership, but with the name A2 Brazil, the Hydrogen Brazil. So we have these pilot plants in Itajubá, Minas Gerais, in Natal, Rio Grande do Norte, The last one just inaugurated was CBioGás in Foz do Iguaçu, no Paraná. And we also have this laboratory at Federal University of Goiás in Goiânia, Goiás. So this is a very important initiative. When we talk about SAF, I think this kind of initiative is very significant because SAF is also an international matter, right? We need to develop SAF and to provide SAF in many airports around the world. So when we have this kind of initiatives, of course, we're thinking worldwide. We had also another initiatives like the biokerosene and renewable platform of Zona da Mata. We had this roadmap provided by FAPESP, the São Paulo State Foundation, in a partnership with Boeing and Embraer. And we have this laboratory in Unicamp. It's LNBR that is also trying to develop new pathways. So it's very important that we have the universities, but also the companies investing in this kind of initiatives to promote the potential of academic initiatives in Brazil. There is another opportunity in the Brazilian government. We call it TED. So it's a kind of a grant provided by each ministry. So the Ministry of Ports and Airports is developing a cooperation led by the University of Federal University of Juiz de Fora in Minas Gerais. But I'm also part of this initiative with the head of the Federal University of Goiás. So we are also mapping all the international best practices, see what is going on around the world, but also analyze the development of SAF in Brazil, all the logistics, the airport infrastructure, if it needs to change or not. So this study is very interesting, and probably we're going to publish the results soon. But to have this kind of initiative, of course, we need more funds. And beyond the fund provided by Ministry of Ports and Airports, the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation, together with FINEP and other agencies, are providing the finance of the Fuel of the Future program, like this one that had a specific research topics in green diesel or sustainable aviation fuel, 63 million Brazilian reais. We also had this economic subsidy that also includes the company, so 20 million reais provided in this partnership with FINEP, but also the BNDES provided a specific loan to the ones that want to develop the SAF facilities in amount of 20 billion reais. And another example of the investments in a state level is this Center for Excellence in Hydrogen and Sustainable Energy Technologies that I'm also a research at this center. So we, of course, focus on hydrogen, but of course, SAF is one of the topics. The Goiás State Foundation, the FAPEG, invested $5.5 million, and we are developing another partnerships that we're going to provide more funding to this kind of a research as well. And just one thing, the coordinator of this center is Professor Christian, and he was also part of the laboratory that was first founded by the Procure. So the German corporation is already at SETS too. Unicamp, the Campinas State University, launched these SAF maps that will really help Brazilian, but also we're talking about expanding this kind of study to the regional level to Latin American level. And it's very important when you talk about sustainability in terms of SAF production. So it maps every aspects of the production and which lands can be used to the production of SAF, but also the feedstock potential in each part of Brazil. And our National Civil Aviation Agency, ANAC, just launched this another initiative called Conexão SAF, SAF Connection, also to continue the work that we started, the ProBio QAV initiative in the Technical Committee of the Fuel of the Future. So it also thinks to continue the dialogue with the multi-stakeholders to bring together every part of the supply chain to discuss how we're going to develop the regulatory and other aspects of challenges for production and consumption of SAF in Brazil. And just to finish, I have some exciting announcements in Brazil. Acelen is so far the one that announced the big numbers right now, and it's expecting to produce SAF starting in 2026. But we had also announcements by Brazil Biofuels, Petrobras in 2 different facilities, Raízen and Gel and Copersucar. They decided not to disclaim the numbers, but to disclose the numbers. But we know that's gonna be big too, and we also have these two other facilities: the Refinaria de Petróleo Rio Grandense and Energies 8 Brazil, that also announced new projects that are going to take place in Brazil. So that's the big picture of all the framework, the legal framework that we need to approve at the Congress, but also the research and investments and the company's announcements. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm willing to answer any questions you might have.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much, Laís, for this really very broad insight into all these different aspects that we will certainly be talking about later on again. Pose your questions in the Q&A tool, and we will come back with them to Laís after the next presentation. And with this, I would like to invite Hanifa Hassanow to our digital floor. Hanifa is joining us from Kenya. Very good to see you. She is Environment Officer at the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, KCAA. She holds a degree in environmental sciences and a master in climate change and sustainability, and has now a fundamental role actually in KCAA, our partner institution in Kenya, to promote, I think, the eager ambitions that the country has regarding cleaning aviation and also going pathways regarding SAF. So the floor is yours. Hanifa, you may share your screen for the presentation. And,
thank you, Ruth. Let me share my screen. Thank you, Ruth. It is a pleasure to be here.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can just click to have it in the full screen mode, and then we're good to go. Perfect. Thank you.
I am happy to present the Kenya Engagement for Clean Aviation. The strategic vision for KCAA is a vibrant, safe, secure, and sustainable civil aviation system. The presentation outline is on status of aviation in Kenya, the Kenya Aviation Net Zero Commitment, Kenya Action Plan, Kenya SAF Roadmap, the SAF feedstock for Kenya, the key SAF challenges in Kenya, the success we had up to date, and the SAF development priority action. The status of aviation sectors in Kenya. As at now, we have 3 major international airports. That is Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, the Mombasa International Airport, and the Moi. The aircraft movements per day is 1,014. The international scheduled flights per day approximately is 300. The number of state pairs flown by Kenyan carriers is 379. The projected growth of aviation industry is 5% per annum up to 2030. Kenya Aviation Net Zero Commitment. We have the enactment of Climate Change Act 2023. This it allows the public and private sectors to report their CO2 emission. KCAA created Aviation Environmental Department that is headed by Winston Gishoro as acting manager environment. We conducted the SAF feasibility studies that is in 2018 under the ICAO EU Assistance Project. Implementation of implementation of the ICAO Annex 16 on environmental protection by developing relevant regulation. This one, we recently had our final stakeholder validation meeting on COSIA regulation, the aircraft engine emission and the noise. It is on final stage of approval. We have a state's action plan for CO2 emission reduction in aviation sector that I will discuss in my subsequent slide. Kenya decided to voluntarily participate in the COSIA with effect from 2021, that is a pilot phase, to 2023, and now the first phase from 2024 to 2027. The scheme addresses the increased annual CO2 emission above the 2020 level. Installation of 0.5 megawatt of solar system in Moi International Airport. This was done under the ICAO EU Assistance Project. The project was completed in 2019. Actually, Moi International Airport is green. Half of its energy comes from the solar power. Kenya Action Plan. We had our initial action plan in 2012. The review was approved in 2015, and now the current and the third action plan was approved by the DG in September 2022. The action plan covers a period between 2022 to 2028. The measures considered in the action plan was technology and standard, the sustainable aviation fuel, the operational improvement, the market-based measures, that is COSIA, and the airport improvement. One of the mitigation measures identified in our second action plan was the development and deployment of sustainable aviation fuel. As mentioned in the previous study, the feasibility study of SAF was conducted in 2018. The study examined the various potential feedstock based on conflicting uses, the logistic, the volumes, and the social factors. It identified the path and required action that could be relevant to the stakeholders, and it also identified the key barriers. Key areas that were determined in the feasibility studies were whether there is enough biomass, the sustainable biomass available in the region. Will it be economically viable to produce biojet fuel? What are the refining pathways? Will it compete with food? What are the challenges and the opportunities? In the feasibility study, the feedstock that were identified was the used cooking oil, which was the benefit was it is available in large volume. There is a proven conversion technologies for used cooking oil, and it is sustainable, does not compete with food. We have another feedstock identified was sugarcane top, which is it is available in large volume. The conversion technologies is still to be commercialized, and also it is sustainable, does not compete with food. Medium to long-term option, it requires the further studies. For municipal solid waste, also it is in large volume. The conversion technologies is still to be commercialized, and it is sustainable, does not compete with food. Medium to long-term option require further studies. For water hyacinths, it is in large volume, but it is difficult to harvest and process. It requires the in-depth study for long-term option. In the feasibility study recommended that the priority to be given to used cooking oil. Reason being, the used cooking oil is available in significant volume. There is a legislation in National Environmental Management Authority that encourages aggregation and benefit-free use of used cooking oil. There is a proven SAF conversion pathways, the HEFA, that allow up to 50% blend, and there is a social and environmental benefit that through the avoiding releasing the used cooking oil in the environment. From the feasibility study, the summary report from the feasibility study that were conducted in 2018, techno-economic assessment of the HEFA pathway. There is a need to investigate the volume of used cooking oil. There is a review of policy on used cooking oil collection. And then there's creating awareness on the used cooking oil aggregation that is even at a household level. Need for sustainability assessment and risk review, assessment of viable conversion technologies, and the quantification of available volume. Key SAF challenges in Kenya: plant financing. The cost of SAF is 4 times the jet fuel. There is a need for capital investment to scale up SAF production. How many airlines will take the SAF, and how to allocate the green premium? As at now, we don't have the facility for fuel testing, certification, and the blending, and the lack of policy and regulatory framework for SAF. Successes we had up to date is the study recommended the focus to be directly to waste-based feedstock, that is used cooking oil in the shorter term, and the municipal solid waste and the sugarcane and water hyacinths in the longer term. We hosted a workshop on SAF scale up, including the power to liquid, which was held in August 2022 and September 2023. This was done in collaboration with the GIAZ P2X Hub. We also in Kenya implemented the SAF toolkit that was launched during COP26 in Glasgow. Kenya has also agreed to enter into a ICAO SAF program to scale up the production of SAF. Collaboration with other partners on SAF production are still under the discussion. The Ministry of Energy has also done the baseline study on the potential of biofuel production in the country to promote the use of SAF. We, in the same time as mentioned in the previous study, that we had the workshop with in collaboration with GIZ P2X Hub. At the same time, in September 2023, we conducted the SAF capacity building training. The participants were from different government agencies, the airline, the academia, and the private sectors. The trainers were from KCAA, GIZ, MIT, and the Hassanow University. The main outcome from the workshop was the formation of public-private sectors to develop SAF action plan that will align with the Aviation Environmental Action Plan, to develop the SAF finance case study that address the risk and green premium, and to conduct a technical analysis on the usability of the oil refinery we have in Mombasa, and to domesticate the SAF policy to help us cover the green premium. We also conducted, Kenya also conducted the workshop in October 2023 in collaboration with COSIA Africa and Caribbean Project. The main outcome from the workshop was to review the biofuel strategy to integrate the SAF policy, to continue with the capacity building on cost-eligible fuel and sustainable aviation fuel. Okay, Kenya collaborated in collaboration with COSI and Africa and Caribbean Project. We conducted a stakeholder workshop that was in October 2023. The main outcome from the workshop was to review the biofuel strategy and to integrate the SAF policy, to continue the capacity building training on cost-eligible fuel and SAF, and to support the development of cost-eligible program in Kenya. We had our first meeting on National Steering Committee on Acceleration of Development and Deployment of SAF in Kenya on 29 May 2024. The main outcome from that meeting was to establish the 6 working group. The working group include the public and private sectors, the academia, and the airlines. One of the working group was the SAF finance case, socio-economic benefit study, the SAF policy, the Mombasa refinery and fuel blending certification, SAF roadmap, and feedstock source and assessment. Opportunities in the implementation of SAF in Kenya. As mentioned in the previous study, there's in the feasibility study, there's a large volume of waste and residue. There's a strong government commitment to renewable energy, and there's a social and environmental economic benefit. The SAF development priority action, the following were the key priority action for SAF development in Kenya. There is a need to develop a national SAF policy, develop SAF national strategy and roadmap, and then we developed the SAF incentive to increase SAF production. There is a need for capital investment to scale up SAF production, capacity building through technical training to expert and knowledge transfer, support SAF pilot project and development, collaboration in SAF through research and development, creation of stakeholder awareness and working group, which this one we have already formed the working group, and the establishment of local, regional, and international partnership. My last slide is on the aviation working group, the stakeholder aviation working group we have in Kenya, which encompasses of the public and private sector. Thank you for listening. Back to you, Ruth.
Thank you very much, Hanifa, for this presentation. And you can stop the share screen right now. And after all these inputs, I would like to invite all our speakers as panelists back into the webinar. We have Laís again with us. We have Neuling now with us from Agora Verkehrwende. He's a colleague of Leon who presented the study in the first place, and will be now responding questions from you in the audience. That's very nice to have you here with us now again. Yeah, we had really quite some feedback and a lot of questions in the audience, and I will start to propose a question to each one of you in the first place. And of course, if you would like to comment among each other as well, and had some thoughts when you saw the presentation of the colleagues here, please feel free to do so, and also add up on some answers maybe that I'll be giving here, so we can imagine it really like a panel discussion as we know it on a face-to-face stage normally as well. Hanifa, yeah, if we have you back in here, welcome. So first, going back to our study and the paper, the study. It's a paper. It's not been a study really in this very technical sense, a compilation of a lot of knowledge. And so the first question, Ulf, would go to you. The highest rated question here would be, wouldn't it be better to actually talk about so-called SAFs so as not to run the risk of being classified as greenwashing? Would you say there is some truth in it?
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Thank you for having me, and thank you also for the other speakers before. Really interesting insights. Yeah, the question, if the name SAF makes a sustainable product by itself, I think it's a very important question. And that is why we also have a big section in our study or in our analysis focusing on the different sustainability aspects. Leon also mentioned the ESG framework, also covering different types of sustainability aspects that have to be kept in mind for the production of e-SAF, of course, but also for biological SAF. So SAF is not sustainable by definition, but we have to make sure that it is sustainable if we produce it. So for the whole supply chain, from feedstock supply, is it biomass or renewable electricity and CO2, via the production, the utilities like energy provision, heat, electricity for the production process. There are only the environmental aspects, but also all the other aspects on the sustainable, social and economic sustainability has to be kept in mind and have to be implemented into sustainability certification schemes and standards, and only then we can really ensure that the SAF we use is also sustainable.
Perfect, thank you. If you allow, just because there were a couple of questions and we are with our heads back into actually the presentations on the study, there was also a question regarding the aspect of additionality, which totally fits into what you have just talked about, the consideration of sustainability. Maybe you could comment on this as well. So the question here would be, can you please discuss the importance of additionality, both in terms of sourcing the hydrogen and the carbon for e-SAF production? What is our key takeaway here regarding this issue?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Maybe I will try to be short. So we fully agree on that. Additionality is very important for e-SAF production because we will need renewable electricity in many different sectors. It's in the industry, in other parts of the transport sector. So we have to ensure that the electricity for SAF production and e-SAF production is provided from additionally installed capacities. And the same is for CO2. As we mentioned, we are focusing on a closed carbon loop in the SAF production. So we need CO2 somehow covered from the air. And that is only possible by biomass or direct air capture. And biomass or biogenic CO2 is limited, as we also heard in the other presentations. So we need a strong focus also on the direct air capture development and wrap up.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ulf. I will address the next question to you, Laís, now. So following up a little bit on the order of the presentations, there was quite some feedback and interest as well. One question of the audience was, does the Brazilian regulation apply to domestic flights only, as the slide suggested, or does Brazil have an international mandate as well?
In the international aspects, we're gonna have to compliance with the CORSIA. So the regulation, the mandate is for domestic flights.
Okay, good. So you have the mandates for domestic and then the reference to CORSIA for the international flights. Okay, thank you very much. And another question regarding Brazil was about the land rights. This also brings us back to the high interest that we always find for the sustainability considerations and how sustainable aviation fuels actually can be. And here the questioning was the following. What about land rights, ecosystems, indigenous population, etc., in your so-called sweet spot areas? We saw them on your presentation slides. What looks empty and available from far away often actually isn't. Do you have a quote on that?
Of course, we have the protected areas. We want to make sure that the traditional communities, the indigenous communities, the quilombolas community are not affected by the production of SAF. So we have the zoning where we can really see where it's going to be the SAF production, and to make sure that for all the facilities or all the big lands, they need to request the environmental license, and it's all set by the environmental ministry. So it's the sustainability. We need to meet the requirements for the national legislation, but we are also concerned, of course, with the sustainable criteria of CORSIA as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I would have a question for Hanifa as well. Kenya, we have looked now to the African continent, and I believe that Kenya could also have quite an important role regionally in Africa. How do you see the position of Kenya in comparison to other countries in your region, and how aviation and SAF activities in Kenya could maybe have benefits for other countries in the region as well?
For Kenya, we also did we done only the feasibility studies, and we formed the working group now that will work on the fuel with the SAF production.
Okay, thank you. And maybe also an international interlinkages with other African states is definitely a way forward also to inspire the work. Perfect. Thank you. We have more questions, and I will make another round unless one of you raises the hand and wants to add up on something more. If we go back to you, Ulf, we have a pretty technical question as well. So Fischer-Tropsch was mentioned as a technology that we will need if we look into e-SAF production, and it is usually produced in huge scale plants. How does that actually fit to the renewables generation and electrolyzer capacities that are needed?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that is exactly the challenge from a technical perspective when talking about e-SAF production via Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, because the synthesis process usually wants to be run very constantly with high full hours over the year, whereas renewable energy production, as we all know, is very fluctuative depending on the wind and sunny solar conditions. And then we have the hydrogen production via electrolyzers. So there are two different technical solutions discussed currently. There's on the one hand side to decouple the hydrogen production or the electricity production from the synthesis via, for example, battery storage or hydrogen storage, which adds up additional costs, investments to the setup. But it can be very beneficial if we have, for example, geological hydrogen storage formations available, which can be used for the storage of the fluctuating hydrogen production. Or on the other hand side, which is also investigated by some industry actors, is to develop new Fischer-Tropsch processes that can be run also not that steadily, but a little more flexible. That will most likely be on a smaller scale, but that could be also very interesting in terms of like smaller modular reactors and plants that can also be deployed in more off-road conditions and locations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much on that one. There's another question also for Laís. Here, it's regarding the RFNBOs and the RED II. Let's see if we can get an answer on this. Can we replicate the renewable share of Brazil to produce RFNBOs at country level under RED II?
Sorry, I couldn't get the question.
Mm-hmm. So the question is if it could be replicated to have the renewable share of Brazil, which is like really high, to produce the RFNBOs, which are the let's say the e-fuels. They fall under the RFNBO legislation of EU under the RED II legislation. So what do you think?
Well, of course, in every time we talk about SAF, we look at the EU regulations and mandates, but in terms of incentivize our national production, we thought that the way that we decided to have a technological neutral will also help us to develop the e-SAF and other pathways that are going to be more efficient in terms of the carbon reduction. So that was our approach and our decision to make the final decision to include in the bill this kind of a mandate, not based on volume or blends, or to have specific blends for each pathway or different kinds of SAF. But of course, in all the funds and grants that I pointed in my presentation, we want to develop this kind of pathway, the SAF, and hopefully you're gonna have more developed facilities in these other pathways too. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hope I answered.
Pardon?
I hope I have answered the question.
If you allow, I would ask you one more question, which goes a little bit into the direction that I addressed to Hanifa before as well. I think it's very interesting to look over the borders of Brazil as well. We were talking shortly about international, the relevance of CORSIA for international long-haul flights and so on. But we have seen so many activities going on in Brazil, and I would like to understand how you perceive actually your neighboring countries and how your role, or how you as Brazilians also see the role in Latin America, for example, regarding the topic, because you are all connected. Now you are flying from one country to the other. A lot of tourism is going on within the continent, within the region as well. So maybe you could say a little thing about this.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Since I started the position, we are talking to Colombia, Chile, and other countries to understand how we can integrate our efforts and work together with the help of the ICAO, the regional office in Lima. Of course, we are also talking with OLAD, that is another international organization that concerns about the energy and fuel aspects. And I think the whole of Mercosur is going to be also important to us to develop a kind of integration of SAF. So we have the presidents of Paraguay now. We are not having this kind of conversations right now in this dialogue, in the energy working group that we have there. But it's also an important matter that we can discuss together with another countries in South America and Latin America and the Caribbean. So hopefully you're gonna have great news soon and I can share to you. But right now, other interesting study that's going to be launched is promoted by Latam and the MIT, which compares the reality of the SAF feasibility and potential in Colombia, Chile, and other countries around here, because of course it's a airline company that really works in the South America. So it's gonna be interesting to see all the results and to have new insights of how can we work together.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Laís, for that insight. When talking about, you presented some numbers as well, figures, how much you are calculating of costs when we have to invest in the new plants, and we are talking about billions and billions of reais, and even, we cannot almost imagine sometimes how much this actually needs. And at some point, this has to be paid. We are looking for investors. This is a hard thing to do, but the discussion very often comes to actually the price for the consumers in the end. And so I will give you a question here, and you can decide, whoever wants to answer to it. Wouldn't it make sense to spread the costs over all flight tickets, actually, to enable a faster ramp up? So far, no reproduction of the true prices, including climate impact, can be actually estimated. Is this something that how would you value this proposition? Is there somebody who wants to go first to answer? Ruth, maybe?
Yeah, maybe I can start on what we are discussing about. So I think there are, in general, two different topics. The one is on how to include the costs of the whole climate impact of aviation, which is something we could discuss about. On European level, aviation is included in the ETS, the emission trading scheme, for some time now. So at least the cost for the CO2 emission is implemented a little bit. And now we are talking about how to finance or to incentivize the SAF production ramp up and this cost difference between conventional jet fuel and sustainable aviation fuel by adding some sort of additional cost or levy or something on ticket prices. And of course, it would be better, each country could start with such a system, but the bigger the areas, or how as many flights are covered by such a scheme, the better it is. So the more international, as aviation is an international system, it would be, of course, perfect to implement such a measure internationally. I have my doubts if this will happen under CORSIA, but we'll see. But at least to start, for example, on a European level, would be a very good start to implement some of the costs from the climate impact of aviation, and thereby incentivize SAF production and SAF market ramp up.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Another question that would go to Laís and Hanifa. There was the observation that you both talked quite a lot about availability of feedstocks in your countries and the studies that have been conducted so far and the results. And it appears so much that there is such a focus actually on bio-SAF resulting from these studies. Our paper now is called Defossilising with e-SAF. So we are trying to bring here into the discussion new pathways that so far haven't had so much of representation, maybe in studies, not yet in the policies. And the question from the audience here actually sounds like this: how are both countries expecting to implement e-SAF really, having good feedstocks to actually produce the bio-SAF? Maybe you could give us an insight in how much actually, after all this ATJ and HEFA enthusiasm, which is there in the discussion around SAF globally, which are the most viable pathways right now. It's probably, the cheapest way to produce SAF by now, but has its limitations. is e-SAF really being discussed and considered in your policies, in your discussions? Maybe you could give us an insight on that. That would be great, from Laís and maybe Hanifa as well.
Yeah, as I said, absolutely. We also want to make sure that all the pathways are going to have funds and grants and will be more developed in Brazil, so we can in the future have not only at ATJ and Hafa, but also the Fischer-Tropsch with a good price to make sure that it gets the commercial scale here too. We are seeing this kind of announcements in the launch of the CBiogas facility, the geo announcements as well, to use the biogas to produce SAF through the Fischer-Tropsch. So we can combine the residues that we have, all these agriculture residues, with the biogas production and with the Fischer-Tropsch. So I think it's a big potential to Brazil to become not export of all these feedstocks, but to produce here using this pathway as well. And of course, to understand what other countries are doing, how they can reduce the price of production, and then reinvest in Brazil as well.
Okay. Thank you, Laís. Hanifa, would you like to state something regarding e-SAF compared to the bio-SAF routes like Hefa that you mentioned in the first place?
Thank you, Ruth. As at now, we are in the process of reviewing our bioenergy strategy. We will include all the pathway in the policy that will cover in the long term the use of the e-fuel.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So
Thank you.
I think there's really still a lot to come, and actually we're coming to the end of our webinar, and I think it actually shows us where the doors are half open and need to be opened more. And I think, if I look into your direction, if we say we hope our publication can shed light into the opportunities, then we will be very happy to accompany this discussion further on. So we're coming to the end of the session, and I would like to thank in the first place Laís and Hanifa very, very much for the presence and for the presentations and also the discussions and insights. And we will be very curious to go together with you in the future and cooperate further between GIZ, Agora, Verkehrwende, PTX Hub, whoever is involved. Thank you very much to Ulf for the participation here in the panel discussion. But as I mentioned, also extended thank yous to Leon as a co-author here, and to all our revisers and contributors in the PTX Hub team. Let me share just very briefly the last slide of today's webinar, because I would not want to leave you without actually making sure that you have all clicked on the link of the publication and go through it with a little bit more of a time. It's an 80 pages document. It's a lot of things to find in there. Go through it. And if you have comments and questions, please use the PTX community to discuss those questions. There might be also some things from the Q&A tool that we couldn't address today. Feel free to use the thematic forum in the PTX community actually to pose the questions there, and we will have our experts answering, or other members from the community. Then this was not the last publication that we are preparing jointly with our partners from Agora Verkehrwende. So currently we are developing another publication on actually international e-fuel policies, really in particular. And we want to provide here an overview about policies in more depth. and also deliver a toolkit for countries that are looking to engage in the e-fuel ramp-up. So we are getting from the overview in the publication more and more concrete and hoping to provide tools that guide you in the countries that are interested in clean aviation and e-SAF more and more on this pathway. And last but not least, the last link of today is that I would like to invite you to our next PTX community call. As I said, this meeting here was also offered through the PTX community as a bi-monthly thematic call that we offer. And the next one will be in October. And if you would like to receive the invitation directly into your mailbox, then please follow the subscription link that was also provided in the chat. Yeah, with this, thank you very much. And I would say bye-bye and a wonderful afternoon into all directions. Thank you very much.